Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys about something regarding the character Jura that has been on my mind for a while now, which is the fact that with Jura's character, it appears as if we're being set up for another twist with the character that we previously hadn't seen before. But given the direction of the character that he is currently on, I think it might be time for us to discuss whether or not Jura is being set up to evolve even further following this current arc, which I personally dub as being the Shinju Awakening arc. So that will be chapters 5 to chapter 13 based off of the promotional material saying that this next chapter is the climax, which is why in today's newest Naruto Explain video, I want to lay out why I firmly believe we might be in the process of seeing Jura evolve into an even more frightening being than he already is at this point currently in the story, and why I believe this is a good path for the story to follow. So jumping right into it, the reason I do believe we need to have a very extremely serious conversation about Jura here is that after watching him continuously seek to improve himself since he's been released, I find it very hard to believe that where he currently is right now is going to be his peak. It would feel like something completely out of character based off of everything we've seen in terms of how he's been displayed in the series so far. So far in the story, we've seen the constant theme of this character be one that is focused on the concept of self-improvement and evolution. Two very similar things, and yet two things that are slightly different based on the historical context and how these two terms are used. So allow me to explain what I mean by that before we go further, since it will be crucial to understanding why I so strongly believe Jura is going to get a transformation or a power-up. So with regards to self-improvement, typically when someone hears something like that, they typically think of someone being in the process of making oneself better or more knowledgeable through their own efforts. This includes, but it's not limited to, knowledge and status or a character aspect of their life. It's a continual quest to make oneself better in every aspect and every facet of life itself. Some people might do things like, say, weightlifting and high intensity interval training like I do, and others might do it by learning new skills like, say, learning to cook via cooking lessons to get various meals, and some might do what Jura does, which is seek self-improvement via the mind by attaining more knowledge. Jura has been shown consistently being written as a character very similar to the Buddha in the sense that he is seeking enlightenment. Only for him, his meditation, it is through reading and expanding his knowledge of the world and the universe itself. For someone like Jura, it's not enough to know the difference between two things, but he seeks to understand every reason behind the two things in terms of why they're different, and he seeks to gain all the similar examples that can be used to relate to it. He looks for correlations. I want you to keep that part in mind, that part in particular when it comes to the Buddha, as we move further into this video, because I'm going to circle back towards it near the end of the video to further explain why Jura is on the path to evolution in the form of a potential transformation. But for now, let's look at the concept of evolution itself. When someone hears the word evolution, they very likely think about the scientific theory that all living things have developed from an earlier type over the many years that their species has existed, that all the differences between them, they come directly because of the changes and external factors that cause evolution, or to use an anime term, this is where you hear, I have been awakened. It is a central theory in modern biology, based on the idea that all species are related, and gradually over time, before something externally causes a genetic variation, a mutation, if you will, inside of a number of the population that affects the physical characteristics, both internally and externally, of an organism. So let's say, for example, a sudden heat wave suddenly strikes the planet and it just never goes away. Many creatures, they would just go extinct. Many of them, they would have their numbers reduced. But over time, the response by nature will be a mutation to allow the future generations of various creatures to be able to survive, to endure the harsh environment. Basically, the species, it either adapts or it dies. For example, the external stimuli that we have here is going to be code, as Boruto says, by using the karma seal. Even though it cannot be used for the resurrection purposes of Ishiki, it still contains a power that belongs to the Otsutsuki clan, And by using it on the Ten Tails, Code has caused a change in the Ten Tails itself and the claw grinds. In short, Code, he played God and created an evolution in the Ten Tails, which have now mutated from one of them having a Rinnegan to now we have the awakened Shinju made up out of the chakra of those who were previously bitten by a claw grind. However, one thing that the story has made clear is the fact that even when compared to the other Shinju, Jura is still completely on a different level when compared to them, and he is continuing to evolve at a rate unlike anything we've ever seen from the other Shinju. Jura is without a shadow of a doubt an apex predator, a sign that there is a shift coming in the hierarchy of power in the Naruto world. Whereas before, the theme of what we saw was that the Otsutsuki, they were predators of this world, the ones at the very top. While there are some humans who underwent their own combination of self-improvement and evolution to combat the Otsutsuki and even become stronger than a lot of them, for the most part, the Otsutsuki, they were a race at the top of the food chain. No different than how there are some creatures on this planet right now, they could kill a lot of humans, yet for the most part, humans are the dominant species on their planet. Jura shows that a Ten Tails is no longer a fodder that is only meant to be feared because it can be used to harvest a chakra fruit, but he's now a walking being capable of forming his own independent thoughts. Whereas the Ten Tails before was this brainless monster, basically Kid Naruto if he was a Ten Tails. And we by extension see that he's reached a point where he's getting excited about being able to show his true power at some point in the story, which brings me to the point of Jura being in line for another transformation. He's already undergone evolution due to the external stimuli that comes from Code using the white chroma seal in the Ten Tails, but that was done when he was a brainless being, incapable of thinking for himself and operating solely off of instincts. The next evolution that comes will be when he's forced to undergo a stimulus that comes as a direct byproduct of him being a being who is a human, who has human-like features that we've seen. Yes, he is a Ten Tails, but for the most part, we can call him a Ningen in the sense that he shows a lot of human characteristics. He is able to think. He is able to understand the emotions that he feels. He's got a thirst for knowledge, both of which are very important, both of which are very human characteristics. If one understands the emotions they feel, they will understand the reason behind their fear beyond just the primal fear that one feels when they're in the presence of a threat that can kill them. When one understands their thirst for knowledge, a thirst for knowledge, which in turn is a form of power, it results in a quest, a self-improvement to gain more knowledge and by extension more power, or in some cases both. When you couple these two things together, fear and thirst driven by circumstantial awareness, you now have the seeds that are planted for a future evolution. You now have the seeds for Jura to become the ultimate apex predator. This brings me back to the Buddha. As longtime viewers of the channel all know, you've heard me mention repeatedly to the point that some of you guys going like, yo, this is Japanese Shinto explained. You've heard me say over and over how the Naruto franchise, it borrows very heavily from aspects of Japanese Shinto, Buddhism, Hindu culture, Japanese culture. If it's Asian, the Naruto franchise has probably used it. Even in Boruto, where people are like, oh my god, it's so disconnected from the Naruto lore. We've seen it with characters like Ishiki and Kawaki and Jigen, beings who possess the Kokugan Eye. In the case of the first two, they have the full Kokugan Eye, and in the case of the latter, Jigen, they have an incomplete Kokugan Eye. The Kokugan Eye, it is patterned after the Dharma Wheel. The Dharma Wheel is associated with the 8 Trifold Path and has been positioned as being above 6 past powers, each of which are the byproduct of the concept of samsara, from the basic 6 past powers that every Rinnegan user has access to, so those 6 paths of pain jutsu as you guys call them, to the higher forms that we've seen with the Rinne Sharingan and Naruto's 6 path Sage Mode and Hagoromo's powers. The superior to Kaguya, Ishiki, and the power that is associated with him versus the subordinate that is Kaguya and the powers that get traced back to her. Samsara is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It is governed by karma itself. the natural law that every action has a reaction and karma can operate across lifetimes, whereas dharma are the moral rules that guide a soul of a being in order to build good karma as part of that effort. Dharma can be defined as a cosmic order and a law, an authority if you will, since it is the guiding principle for the morals and nature that apply to all things made in creation. The end goal is to have a living being reach moksha, the liberation from samsara, which only happens after so many rebirths, which is what happened with Shibai, who was reborn after so many times. As we're told, he ultimately transcended. In the database for the second volume of the Boruto manga, that manga being 2 Blue Vortex Volume 2, we are told that the current god tree, it is made up of Shibai's remains, the husk that Amato spoke of in chapter 75 of Boruto's manga. What we're seeing here with Jura is that, like the Buddha, replace meditation with reading to acquire knowledge. Jura is someone who is experiencing the Four Noble Truths. He is learning them in real time. Life is suffering. Suffering is caused by craving. Suffering ultimately ends, and there will be a path that will lead to the end of suffering itself. Jura is in the process of craving knowledge, but he hasn't suffered yet. When he does suffer, it's going to lead to him realizing there is a path to ending the suffering, but he's got to go through a lot of suffering before that, which, given the tropes with Battle Shonen, even in the Naruto franchise, that usually results in updating oneself in some capacity to force an evolution. For a character like Jura, who shows many of the common traits that we see with characters like Cell from Dragon Ball, Kaiju number 9 from Kaiju number 8 story, the calculus and the gradual moving towards evolution after being tied directly to the concept of evolution from the very introduction to the story, I can see Jura walking down that path, if for no other reason than Boruto has served at times as a love letter to Dragon Ball. Hence why I say over and over, if you really want to appreciate Ikimoto's art, you really owe it to yourself to read Dragon Ball's manga, and you will see what I'm talking about. From Ikimoto intentionally handling the Nemu of the manga in a way where the poses from Dragon Ball, they are remade more than once, to even the way that the action itself is paneled, to a point that it captures the signature paneling of Akira Toriyama better than Toriyama's own handpicked successor, and the elements from the story at times, they have been sprinkled in to pay homage in the same way that Kishimoto did when he took elements of Hunter x Hunter and used them for early Naruto. We have examples of this in Boruto, from the mad scientist in Amato being the Boruto equivalent of Dr. Gero, and having cyborg siblings in Ada and Damon be stand-ins for Lapis and Lazuli, better known as 17 and 18. Lapis and Lazuli are the names they went by when they were humans who were not modified yet by Dr. Gero. That explains why Jura gives off the vibes of being like Cell, which I'm not going to be shocked if we get to a point like Cell, just like the Buddha, where he reaches enlightenment by ascending to a higher plane. Only, unlike the Buddha, this will be a physical ascension in terms of the power to fit the Battle Shonen tropes, which would be almost as much of a shock as what happened with Pochita and Yoshida in the new Chainsaw Man chapter, which over here on the left, my new review breaks down that huge plot twist in the Chainsaw Man story, and over here on the right, we have another Naruto Explained video.